Hello, I'm Kanat and I'm the host today of Venus is the Word. We are a movement based in Brisbane looking at creating safer homes and safer streets, trying to treat and assist people with themselves in terms of how to address domestic violence, whether you're the victim, the aggrieved, whether you're the perpetrator, the aggressor, or whether you're a family member. Now, Venus is the Word was started about 18 months ago because I lost my daughter to circumstances with domestic violence. So I decided to do something. And one of those things that I've been very fortunate to do is actually put a podcast together. And this is about our third or fourth series. And I'm very pleased today that I have some very lived experienced people from both a victim, aggrieved perspective, but also from a perpetrator, aggressor perspective. And we've also been very fortunate to engage a wisdom coach. So before I go on any further, I just acknowledge at this very early stage all those people and families who have lost their family members to domestic violence, and acknowledge that. And hopefully together we all can make a difference. We're currently going through a pandemic, a virus, but we have a virus or a pandemic in our very homes, which is domestic violence. So before I go on any further, I'd like to introduce my guest speakers. I've got Luke, who's a young man who's been through the road. He's walked down the road of domestic violence as an aggressor. He's gone through the system. He's come out the other side. He's on the road to change. And that's the beautiful thing about human behavior. You can change once you learn skills and also your lived expression of changing your life. I've also got Jasmine. Jasmine's a young lady who has actually been a victim or an aggrieved person in a relationship. And both Luke and Jazz will share their stories with us, which we're really, really grateful, because it takes bravery and courage to share their lives with us. And also, we're very fortunate to also have Belinda. Now, Belinda is a wisdom coach, an author, an international guest speaker, public speaker, and she's here as well. So before we go any further, I'd like to ask Luke, Brother Luke, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Luke. I was the perpetrator of domestic violence, mainly in the manner in which I spoke, aggressive behavior, which I didn't think was wrong. I didn't think of the ramifications of my actions or how my words could hurt psychologically and cause fear. The reason I'm giving my time is to promote awareness, to show any men or women who perpetrate DV, no matter how bad things are gotten, there's always organizations out there to help. Self-reflection is the key to change and learning your triggers, and knowing this is not acceptable behavior. 3 words to sum up my message today: self-reflection, love, and healing. Thank you.
Thanks, Luke. And those 3 words were
Reflection, love, and healing.
Love and healing. I've just asked all our speakers to have 3 key words they'd like to share as a bit of the theme. So thanks again, Luke. And now we'll go to Jasmine.
Hello, and thank you for having me on the podcast. So I've been through 2 types of domestic violence, both mental and physical. And I guess in both instances, I'm giving my time and energy, because I guess there wasn't really any knowledge around where I could go, what kind of help was available, other than the help phone calls. And so I wanted to be able to break the stigmas around it and ensure that everyone has the same level of knowledge around DV and what kind of support is out there. My 3 words isn't really, 3 set words. It's more of a sentence. And my 3 words of choice is: vulnerability isn't weakness.
Could I have those words again, please, Jazz?
Vulnerability isn't weakness.
Isn't weakness. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Vulnerability isn't weakness. Brilliant. Fantastic. And now I'd like to introduce Belinda.
Hello there. I'm super excited to be here. I was absolutely thrilled to be invited by you, Kanat. So thank you for that. I these days live by the philosophy that you are the author. Your life is your story. It's not over yet. There has been a pause somewhere where something has happened. You've either been a victim of or perpetrated domestic violence. There may have been there's many reasons for a pause. It could be a death. It could be a redundancy at work. It could be, any number of things. But people experience a gap. And I talk these days into the pause. My 3 words are write, travel, and speak, because I think if we can articulate what we've done and why we've done it, we can then pull the lessons from that and go, how do I use those lessons to rebuild a better life for me and for everybody around me going forward? That's my mission. Ultimately, reconnecting humanity.
Great. Thanks for that, Belinda. So, right, travel, and speak.
Yeah.
Excellent. So just in terms of that, like today's podcast, and I think you've all shared it, is that, we need to talk to our families, each other, around this shared knowledge of help seeking. And help seeking, but it's also about the self. And I think Luke said self-reflection in the very beginning, love, self-love, and also self-healing. And sort of that's, when you look at self-help, it's about helping yourself to rewrite your story, like Belinda's saying, to travel through life and to speak your truths. And that takes a lot of work. And we're just going to share that if you're in a DV situation now, whether you're a perpetrator or you're an aggrieved person, a victim, like we're trying to share in this podcast how you can get strong or how you can seek help to become a stronger person and also enjoy life. And Jasmine's point in vulnerability is not a weakness, vulnerability, but seeking help. How do we seek that help? So that's the theme of today's podcast. As we're going to unpack this, the session today, I'd actually call upon Jazz and Luke again. Now, Jazz, I'll go with you first. You mentioned you were in a relationship. It wasn't the best relationship. It was you termed it domestic violence. A question to you is, and I'll ask Luke the same question as well, as a perpetrator aggressor. Jasmine, what was the precise turning point in your life, in your DV experience, in your relationship, that triggered you to recognize? What were the triggers that really pushed you or recognized you, or you recognized that you needed to get to seek help, but also about your own behavior? When was the moment, if you could capture that for us, please?
Sure. So I've been in 2 different relationships where it's resulted in domestic violence. And the first one, it was actually the ending of our relationship and 000 had to be contacted. And that's when I had realised that things were way out of my hands and I couldn't really help anything to do anything with that situation. And so a lot of things had happened in that situation where I realised that I could have potentially, gotten help sooner. I could have spoken to people. I could have spoke up about my experience and what was going on. And then later in life, I ended up in a secondary domestic violence relationship. And with that one, I realised that it was more a mental game. And then when the physical acts of frustration, like punching the car or punching a wall, became more of a common occurrence, that was when I realized that something was going on and that this was not okay behavior. And so I started putting little steps into place, like reaching out to friends and family, reaching out to colleagues that I knew I could trust, and trying to put some little barriers in place, try and stop it from getting too physical and before it was out of my control, like the last one.
Can you explain your just some of the emotions you were going through? What were the feelings? What were you feeling at the time? Your emotions?
I was very scared. because I had the first time I'd never experienced anything like that. And the second one, I kind of felt somewhat like stupid in a way, because I had thought to myself, well, I've been through this again. Why have I put myself in this kind of position again? And so it was a mixture of being scared, feeling stupid, and a lot of confusion.
Belinda, any comments?
Yeah, yes. Jazz, that's a really interesting point that you made. And just to put your mind at ease, and I'm sure it already has been, there's definitely no such thing as stupid in a situation like this. But what I would wonder is, what was it that these people gave you initially that you felt like it was an okay place to go for a relationship? Does that question make sense? I'm just curious whether there was a similarity, or whether they gave you something that was missing in another part of your life.
100%. So I had a very complex childhood, to put it, I guess, in a simple way. And there was a lot of times when I didn't receive validation from my mother, and unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of, I guess I didn't get to see my dad because of a relationship that was strained because of, I guess, custody arrangements and so forth. So the relationships, they offered me a lot of validation in the beginning. They offered me, time, caring, and they gave me that promise of you're worth it kind of thing. And then that quickly changed after 3 months. So that was sort of what I was looking for when I was looking for a relationship.
So that actually brings me to another point, which is really interesting, and we haven't touched on it at all yet, but that sounds very narcissistic to me, because people build you up and build you up and build you up and build you up, and all of a sudden you're on a pedestal and you think you can do no wrong. And that may be slightly elevated, but essentially they've given you exactly what you think you need. And then they go and pull the carpet out from underneath you, and you're going, hang on a minute, what happened? And then somehow or other it's your fault, and they've made you feel worthless. And that is that cycle of being accepted by a narcissist, and recognizing that now when they come into your life again. That's a really tough journey. In fact, it's a journey I went down myself, and that it left me in a very bad place. But I'm fortunate that I have been trained in life coaching and so forth, and I knew that all my buttons had been pushed, and I knew how to seek help, which was to just phone a friend, thank goodness. And for me, I was on the phone to her for about 2.5 hours, and I knew by the end of that conversation that I would be okay. So tough road, Jazz, and I'm sorry that that's happened to you, but it's not an uncommon story. And I think that's what I'm trying to say to everybody, is it's not uncommon at all. If there's something missing, if there's something missing from your childhood, and somebody all of a sudden gives you that, it's like, bring it on. This is what I've been craving, and all of a sudden I've got it. Yeah.
Look, and and Jasmine mentioned your feeling of you being stupid. It's that self-belittling. And Jazz, like we've had conversations before, your own self-doubt, self-belittling. Now, and that sort of encompasses any aggrieved person, whether you're male or female. You start questioning yourself. Now, I'm going to throw to Luke. Now, Luke, I want to find out what your turning point was in your journey. What was the turning point, given what we've just heard? I'm just interested to find out what made you be the advocate you are today, which I've got to say, you're very strong in your articulation of being part of the change.
To put it plainly, I mean, I never actually condoned my behavior. It just crept in over time, and it was with certain people too. It wasn't with the mother of my kids or anyone else. Like, it was just with a couple of people, and I didn't realize I was doing it unbeknownst, and it was brought on from I grew up in a DV childhood home, and I think it was subconsciously in the back of my mind somehow. I brought it into that onto my adult life, and it was only triggered by certain people. And just having that pause, like Belinda said, like when I did it, I always felt disgusted in myself, but I just couldn't bring myself to get the help at the time. And I always look back and I feel guilty. There's no words that you could describe the guilt I feel, but I'm just trying to, with AA, I was able to do my amends and my step 4 and realize the ramifications of the things I'd done. And then when Hannah Clark died by her husband, that's when it was the breaking point to me. It was like, this needs to be stopped, and I need to use my experiences to tell this youth growing up that it's not acceptable, because I have a daughter and I wouldn't want this happening to my daughter or to my son. That was it. That was the turning point for me.
So Luke, you mentioned that when you were in it, like in that act, I suppose, you knew. Did you have was there a conscious thought, I'm doing wrong, or was it just all out red? You just saw red.
Yeah,
it was uncontrollable. What?
Like I said, it wasn't to the mother of my kids. Me and my mother kids have got a good relationship. There's never been any instances of that. It was after that I had a relationship, and I feel sorry. I feel really, really guilty for what I done. It's just, and then when you have that breaking point, and then you think, I've got a daughter. Would I want this to happen to my daughter? No, you wouldn't. Would I want this to happen to my son? No, I wouldn't. So that's the point where you get to, and you're fully ashamed of yourself, and I don't want to be like my father. My father was like that, and that's where the turning point in my life was. I needed to turn it around, and I needed to turn it around quick. And also with the AA program, I'm able to do an altruistic approach by helping others going forward.
And what's the AA? What is the AA approach, Luke?
AA is an altruistic approach by just driving to, like, passing on the message of my alcoholism, because also I had alcohol problems as well. But not only that, it's a spiritual program in which you could also, so that you can carry the message on. So if I can use my experiences with DV to carry it forward for a future generation, that's the altruistic approach going forward.
And I think, well, thanks, Luke. And Belinda, in terms of Luke, and Luke also mentioned that helping others, like support other men, I suppose, and boys, work through their, controlling their behaviour or identifying the behaviour. And what Luke was saying there, like Luke didn't want to be like his dad or other men who may be negative role models. I sort of, when you were saying that, I was sort of thinking about removing yourself away from that scenario and looking in and saying, what is going on? Like, how do I change this? And, removing yourself and as a tool. But Belinda, what are your thoughts of all that? I know I'm throwing you.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Luke, how old were you when you made that decision that enough was enough and you had to step back?
I would have been, I'm almost 40 next year, so it would have been 3 years ago when I had to take a look back, not long after Hannah Clark died, and that was the breaking point to me. This is a real epidemic here. There's people dying, and there's so many deaths that people don't know about.
Absolutely.
They're not a statistic, and that's not even including in the US. The US is just as bad. There needs to be something done about this, and that was it.
So I guess what always comes into my head is we do the best we can with the information that we have available to us at the time. And as you were growing up, you didn't know any differently because that was your life. And that was what your role model did. So that's what you, as learned behaviour, also did. But then once you got old enough to realise that, hang on a minute, this isn't sitting right with me, mentally, physically, spiritually, heart-wise, there was no connection to what you were doing and what was right, if that makes sense. And then the Hannah Clark situation happened, and that was a huge turning point for a lot of people, I do believe. A lot of people were affected by that situation, and terribly, terribly tragic. But it turned around somebody like you. So in the moment of that desperation and what happened with that family, there has actually been, that has been a catalyst for good to happen in the world. Isn't that often the way, that some deep tragedy causes a light to emerge? And you're one of those lights. You're a shining beacon now. You can stand up there and go, I was this person, I did this thing, and now because of this, I am no longer that. I know better, therefore I will do better.
And I think the takeaway line for me there, Belinda and Luke and Jazz, is, you know, it's changeable. Behaviour,
Absolutely.
actions is changeable. And like, you know, and I'll call him brother Luke says there, is that, you know, that takes, you know, there's guilt that comes with that comes with that story.
But you know what it takes? It actually just takes a decision. You just decide one day, I am not going to do this anymore. I am not going to live my life abusing people, or, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally, you know, whether it's words or it doesn't matter. The point is, I've made a decision. I am no longer going to do that thing. What else am I going to do?
And, you know, that's so true. It's a decision you make. It takes probably 0.005
like that.
microseconds to decide. And that is actually a great segue. I've always wanted to use that word segue, but I'll use that segue to Jazz. Jazz, and I'm going to go back to what Belinda said earlier. It's the male energy and the female energy, and I've never really thought about this. Now, in terms of you, Jazz, in your opening, you said that you contacted your friends because tell me, it's probably easier for you to do that as opposed to males. But I just want to know how comfortable were you with connecting with when you recognised the situation? How comfortable were you with then reaching out to your female friends?
Well, I mean, I have a very small circle of friends, which has like 3 people in it. So I guess I'm really close with them, and I've been friends with them for over 10 years. So for me, it was easier because I had noticed that I had stopped talking to them. He had kind of pushed them out of my life. And they had started contacting me saying, why are you being weird? And that's when I kind of just opened up. So it was more of just them asking me what's going on for me to realize, hey, there is something wrong here, kind of what's going on. And then I kind of put all the dots together, and it was sort of like that situation. And I do have to thank one of my closest friends, TK, because right at the end of my last relationship, she actually took me down to Melbourne, just to get me away from it and to help me get through this, because I've been friends with her since I was 7. And so she took me through all of it. She helped me get through all of it. And still today, she helps me get through everything. So for me, it's really easy to open up to my friends, but I can understand how it may be hard to open up if you're not that kind of close of a friend.
Yeah, look, I just know that as a guy, when I was younger, I used to admire my sisters and my other female friends, how easy they were to just talk about anything. And us guys, Luke, I don't know about you, but certainly we had to have persona of being tough. We had to have, we had to be the man. Whereas I think it comes back to that female male energy. What are your thoughts, Luke?
Well, that's what I'm wanting to drive the message to young people, that I'm wanting to educate them that it's okay to be, like, it's not weak to speak. It's not weak to speak about your feelings. It's okay to have love, empathy, and to talk with your partner rather than show aggression. And there's other ways to communicate. lots of ways. And that's what I just want to drive the message, that you just have that buffer where you need time out, you know, and step away and you think about what you're going to say before you say it.
And excuse me, that goes back to Jasmine's 3-word statement. Vulnerability isn't weakness. Vulnerability, and I think certainly for both male and females, and also for bystanders, I think the missing piece in all this formula is there's neighbours, there's family who are bystanders, and we all need to own the solutions to this pandemic of violence in our homes and in our streets, because it's just too common. Any thoughts there, Belinda?
Lots of thoughts on that. Jazz, typically what a narcissist does, and I fear that you've been involved with 2 of them, is they do remove you from your family and from your friends, and they keep you isolated. That's how they control you. So that is not an uncommon story amongst narcissists who then go along to cause domestic violence kind of situations. And you have my absolute empathy, I can assure you. As far as what you were saying, Luke, we have, you know, boys, men in our society have been indoctrinated into this, you know, you've got to be tough, you've got to be this, don't cry, you'll get over it, you know, all that kind of thing. And I do feel like there's a disconnect with their softer side, with that softer energy. You know, they're taught not to, you know, they go out and play with their trucks instead of cooking, or, you know, whatever it is. But there seems to be this massive divide between what is okay for a boy to do and what's not okay for a boy to do. That's becoming a little more fluid these days, but there's like 2 generations, 3 maybe, that were raised with this divisional line of male, female kind of jobs or tasks around the house, or even feelings that you were allowed to feel. And I think there is definitely a softening of that now, but I think with people like you coming forward and speaking out about it, I'm hoping that we can reach those generations that, you know, have already been. One of the most important things that I feel about how to reconnect with ourselves, first of all, because I think any of this has to start, it's all an inside job. To me, everything starts with self-love. And in my book, The Becoming of Wisdom, I talk about how, and I fiercely believe this, that time in nature cures most of what ails the human spirit. So whether that's 5 minutes in the morning, putting your feet on the grass and just going, oh my God, this just, you know, just earthing yourself and grounding yourself, it just helps to dissipate any of that negative energy or anything that's been flowing through you. And through to a 3-day, 4-day, you know, a month out wandering out in the bush, whatever that is, I think that when we reconnect to nature, we reconnect to ourselves. And when we do that, then we can reconnect to humanity.
And I just on that, what Luke said earlier is like, yeah, like you actually paused. You had time out to reflect. And like Belinda's saying, having that, you know, using nature to work on yourself. Now, I'm very interested to find out from both Jazz and Luke, and I'll go with you first, Jazz. What are some of the, Belinda mentioned working on the inside of you as a person, building an immune system, if you like, your own spiritual, emotional immune system to cope, to get help, or to continue getting help, because it never ends. Your self-development never ends until they put you in a pine box in a good way after a long life. Constantly working on yourself. So you're both, I can see Luke and Jazz working on themselves after these, and also Belinda, she shared her own experience. But certainly, Jazz, what have you done? What did you do at the time and now? What are you doing now and previously to really build your immune system to cope better with relationships, to create healthier relationships?
Well, the first thing I did was I nurtured relationships that had been affected by it. So my friendships, my family relationships, I nurtured all of those to rekindle them and make sure they were okay. And I guess the next step for me was to, at the time I had ended up having to resign from my position due to health reasons. So I ended up moving in with my dad, which has led me on this incredible path of self-growth and just basically led me to flourish. And his insight and support and encouragement has just been incredible. So my dad is now a qualified counsellor, so his insight and support in the way of like the psychological side of things is incredible. And part of me also had to get my finances in check, so his help with that has also been immense. And for me, I guess for my mindset, if I can sort my finances out, everything else is okay and I can work on that. So I guess for me, what I've been doing is just focusing on my finances, getting myself out of debt, getting myself into, a great position financially. And I guess my big goal is to make myself so secure in my own self, by myself. That way, no matter what happens in the future, I know I'm going to be okay. And I guess for that, I need to get myself financially secure and then buy a house. So that's what I've been focusing on most.
Good on you. Good on you. And I'm going to throw to Belinda here soon. What I got out of that, Belinda, was she's surrounded herself with people, her dad, and most dads do this, hopefully, is supporting and nurturing you where you are. No, just like nurturing. The word nurturing is a beautiful word. You nurture someone to be who they are and not control and cut them off at the knees to bring them down. So it's about influencing your choice. It's the individual's choice who they hang around with, obviously. Belinda.
Yeah. Jazz, did you say earlier, I thought I heard you say earlier that your dad was not part of your life because of the situation with your mum and dad?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
So you were removed from all that wisdom when you were a kid growing up?
Yeah, I didn't. We got like every second weekend, and then it kind of custody was a mess.
As being there all the time. It's just
no, definitely not. And I didn't get to see him in my teen years, which was obviously my most troublesome years, and I had a lot going on mentally. So that did take its toll.
Yes, I understand. Look, I'm so happy for you that you've made that decision. Your dad's clearly a really cool guy. It's such a shame that you were denied that in your formative years. That's a problem for the legal system, and the family courts have really got to I'm going to swear here, they've got to get their shit together because they make some really, really bad decisions. Really bad decisions. I mean, parents make bad decisions, but the family court makes some really bad decisions. Sorry if that offends anybody, but that's been my experience, and I know I'm not alone. However, having said that, I'm absolutely delighted that you're now in touch with your dad, and I'm glad that he's able to support you and help you get through some of these things, because having somebody trusted and who's related to you and who's that little bit older and a lot wiser and so forth, he can give you feedback and information that you just wouldn't pick up from somebody else. And 100%. Being able to, and even with your finances, being able to support you with your finances, that is one of the most important things that a woman can do. Being in, like I've been married and divorced twice, and then I had a brief encounter with a narcissist, which was, very bad. But I walked away from both of those marriages with very little, because my self-preservation mechanism ticked in, and I knew that I needed to go for me, regardless of what I left behind or left on the table or left in the bank account or left in the business or whatever. I just knew that I had to go for me. And that's what I did. And that's what we do. So I found myself a few years ago at nearly 50 having to start again financially. And that is a hard road. So for you to be able to do it now, I take my hat off to you, girlfriend, because it's a tough journey, but you've obviously got great support and, you know, awesome. Go do you.
Good on you. And look, I'm going to go to Luke. Now, Luke, there's I'm still intrigued with male and female energy. There's a male energy that says that we don't need to work on ourselves, or we're okay, we'll be right. I don't know if that's an Aussie thing. We'll be right, mate.
Yeah, it
but
is.
Certainly, what are your thoughts and your experience actually? Tell us your story in terms of your healing then and now, 3 years into the making.
I was lucky to seek counselling, comprehensive counselling, like grief counsellor. I had a lot of trauma put down that I've been bottling up. I got an inner peace now because I didn't have emotional intelligence before, which I do now. So I didn't have that in relationships, and that was unbeknownst to me because my dad was missing too for a certain period of time because of the DV. I started to learn empathy and I connected to my higher power. So I had something to look forward to every morning. I learned to love myself, and self-identity is really important for men. If you lose your identity in a relationship, and I think Jasmine can relate to this too, when there's a controlling man and they sort of stifle your identity somehow, they take away your power in that regard, so you can't connect with your family members. Once you find that self-identity and you practice self-care every day, meditation, grounding, and I do my gratitude list every morning, and that helps me a lot. It's just being thankful for the small things, and if I don't expect anything in the future, like I don't put too much big expectations on people, I can't be disappointed, you know what I mean? Because I'm happy being me, and I think that's where a lot of men go wrong, because they have too much expectations on their spouse, and they should just be happy in the moment, and everything flows from there. You got love, empathy. Yeah.
Look, I'm glad you broke the word. You've raised the title, emotional intelligence. Mate, I'm going to ask you, Luke, not everybody would know what that means. So what does that mean to you, given your lived experience with emotional intelligence, if you wouldn't mind sharing that?
I didn't have this before, so I can gauge how people are feeling, so I can sort of have a buffer between I'm not saying something appropriate and they don't like it, so I can sort of gauge, pull back a bit, and then say something nice, and just I'll be more receptive to people, in other words, and how people feel.
Like when you're saying something, like you're telling your partner, whether you're male or female, and you're telling your partner, "Oh, look, you just look awful. You look terrible today. What are you doing? Why are you dressing like that?" You now have a filter to say, "Hang on, how's my partner going to feel?"
100%.
Is that what you're saying?
Definitely, yeah.
So what made you? How did this click in your emotional intelligence index?
I just, I put it predominantly to the higher power and the AA program. Yeah, I did a harms inventory, and so that helped me assess what I'd done wrong to a lot of people. And then it was a pretty long list, comprehensive list, and I was able to go through it. And I was like, I did this, I did that, and I was just like, oh, did I do that? And I felt so ashamed. And then so it's given me a buffer now, or like a barrier to stay, not to do it again.
I like that use of buffer. Like you're reacting to something, but there's a buffer that sort of, before it actually happens, you sort of filter through to a better product. What do you think, Belinda? What are your thoughts?
It sounds like it's a bit of a checklist. am I being this kind sort of person, or am I being, you know, a not so kind person? And it gives you a checklist, or, you know, a check and balance as to what role you're playing at that given time. And you can assess more quickly now where you're sitting in that spectrum, and be able to swivel your, you know, whatever's going on, I was going to say your attitude, but perhaps whatever's going on, you can respond more appropriately with that checklist going on, which I think is great. Now, you said a few things that were really interesting there, Luke. IQ. When you get IQ and EQ, which is your emotional intelligence and your intelligence, you know, your brain intelligence, all in the same place, man, that's a powerful thing. And you're really working on that. So I commend you on that. You know, emotional intelligence is phenomenal. And once we can tap into that, life can be so much better, so much better. Empathy, self-identity, of course, everything comes from within anyway. So the essence of you is you. And you're starting to pull these bits out of you now that have always been there, but were shut down for whatever reason. And now being able to execute those in a really positive and proactive way is giving you much better results in the conversations that you're having, in the relationships that you're developing, in the work that you do. And I would imagine in your everyday interactions with people, things are just looking a lot better for you.
And
yeah.
Just thanks for that, Belinda. Thanks for that. It's that, yeah, that buffer, and I think that's a valid point there. And I'm still going to go back to the male and female energy. You've got me thinking, Belinda. Now, because I want to raise and Jasmine said it earlier. Jasmine, with your summary of your self-help, is about getting around like-minded people, surrounding yourself with like-minded people, like if you, so to
really
try and,
important.
Yeah, to build you. Because I'm going to go to Luke on this next one. Is I've unfortunately heard, actually I'm watching, I told everybody, to our listeners and our viewers, I've told everybody watching this movie called Made, M-A-I-D, on Netflix, and I've probably given it a free plug, but Netflix a free plug. But certainly it's an interesting storyline, because the male perpetrator, and look, I'm just going to say perpetrator, his friends, male friends, sort of wanted to turn in the girl back to the situation and said, "You're being an idiot, give him time." And they were like not looking at the situation and saying, "Hey, you can't be violent against your partner." But there's a male acceptance, sort of, which is scary, that, you know, and these people are in relationships. And I've got a real life situation someone shared with me last week about, someone's daughter. The friends, she went to a friend's, husband and wife. The husband went back to the male partner and told the person all the stories and where they were living and so forth. So there's that circle, Luke. That's a male energy of, don't know what you call it. What are your thoughts, Luke?
I just think they get into this whole macho stereotype sort of thing, and they sit back and they all congregate and, you know, like talk about the woman behind their back, and, you know, and they don't respect I think it comes down to respect, you know, like if you don't respect the person, and you know, if you really love that person, you wouldn't do that, you know, like you wouldn't want to wish harm upon anyone. And I just can't get that, you know. It's just like, you know, why would you want to hurt someone to that extent, you know, like, you know, it's not in my nature, you know, like, and with this higher power, I'm able to see that very, very clearly now, that, you know, everyone has a right to be fundamentally safe. Everyone, that's women and men as well, you know. Everyone has a right to have security and safety. And like example, you just said that I wouldn't want my daughter to feel like that, you know. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's like there's a cone of silence over how men think about stuff and how they communicate about stuff. And I think it just needs, they talk about the glass ceiling for women in professional things and so forth, and how they get this far and they can't go any further. But I think there's a massive cone of silence over what guys talk about in these sort of situations, in these negative situations, that just needs to be absolutely shattered.
I think it's just learning to unmute yourself.
Say that again, Jazz.
Yes.
I think it's just learning to unmute yourself, because you think about kids and you go, you see boys being really rough as kids. You're like, oh, boys will be boys kind of thing. And it's learning to unmute yourself and actually speak up and go, that's not okay behaviour. That needs to be, stopped now while they're young.
And Jazz, what you just said, boys will be boys, I have been hearing that all my life. And it is the biggest load of codswallop. That's no excuse. That is no excuse. Yet women say it all the time. Men say it all the time. Boys will be boys. And it's like, well, what are girls?
Exactly. It's just not okay.
Like giving them an excuse to be rough and tumble. Rough and tumble is fine in a play kind of thing, but rough and tumble can get really out of control.
Yeah, and I think, Jasmine, you did say your three words were vulnerability isn't a weakness. And that's sort of resonating with a lot of the conversations of help, is that you need to say, yeah, I'm vulnerable. And we look at vulnerable in Australian culture. Sorry, Belinda. We look at vulnerability in Australian culture, especially with men, as a weakness. And also with women, well, I can't speak for women, but certainly, yeah. So you're Belinda, sorry?
I was just going to say that words actually have poundage. So we need to choose our words really, really wisely. And vulnerability is one of those words that gets bandied around a lot. And I don't think people understand necessarily the true meaning of the word. And it could mean something different to everybody. It's like one of those value words, people have a set of values and the word means something different to each person. So what does vulnerability mean to each of us? It means to me to be able to be fully present in who and what I am in any given situation and not be frightened of that, and be able to speak my truth and know that I'm not going to be judged, know that I'm not going to be put down, and know that I'm going to be accepted for who and what I am and who and what I say at the time. Knowing that I'm always coming from a place of love and curiosity, and that we're all doing the best we can with what we know at the time.
And I think, but certainly from the conversation, it's about working on yourself to have that pause, to give yourself a break, to breathe, and to be like, create emotional intelligence and knowing that how is my behavior, it's a bit of empathy as well. It's about how am I behaving, impacting on the other person.
Absolutely.
Healthy relationships, how to be that person. And Jazz, like living at home with your dad, you're surrounding yourself, you're immersing yourself in this positive mindset. And I suppose in relationships, you've got to look at, because when you go home, that's how you live your life. You go home to the sanctuary of a home. If you're fortunate to have a house with plenty of homeless people, if you go to home and you go to your nest, your place of safety, how uplifting is that place? Is it a place where you go in and your spirit rises? Or is it a place you go and your spirit is chopped at the knees? And that's a real self-reflection in terms of, because that chopped at the knees could be physically dangerous, but more potent, I believe, is psychologically damaging to one's soul and spirit. We've got about 8 minutes to go, so I'm going to go to each panelist, and I thank you for your time, but I'm going to throw just in summary of conversation and your thoughts as we wrap up this really useful and vital conversation. And I thank you all for being authentic and raw in changing the way that this country and the globe, we're on the internet, it could go global in terms of how we change behaviour. So I'm going to go with Jazz. You first, Jazz.
I guess for me, I think overall my main, conversation and the pointers of this is speaking up, and making sure that understanding for me, like Belinda was mentioning, everyone has their own understanding of vulnerability. And I think mine is accepting yourself and accepting the situation. So that way you can speak up and go, okay, don't be ashamed of this situation. It is what it is. You can't change it. But what you can do is you can speak up so it can be changed.
Beautiful.
And I think that's the biggest thing is you need to go, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be in that situation right now, but you need to accept it and get help.
Cool. Luke?
Yeah, the same, like just what was said before about validation and like people deserve to be safe and validated, and men should speak out when they see someone being aggressive or showing coercive, controlling behavior to people. Men should find it within themselves to say that's not okay to another guy, or vice versa, the other sex, people got to call each other out on it, because if they call each other, they make out it's not acceptable. This is where we draw a line in the sand, and that's where you've got to come to that point in your life, what's acceptable and what isn't.
Cool.
Yeah, and that would be my message.
That's that bystander. That's how bystanders can contribute to the narrative, is calling out that shit.
Definitely. And that would be my thought. And that would be for young people as well. So they know it's not acceptable for future generations. And the ones before, as Belinda said, like the ones in the 70s, the 80s, Yeah, exactly. So
call it out. Call it, and that's a bit like we got 5 minutes to go, but certainly that's like Jazz saying, call it out. I love it. Belinda.
Look, I'm delighted with the conversation that we've had, because I think we've established today is that it's normal. There's a lot of people that have endured various types of domestic violence and other domestic and family violence, I'll call it.
Yep.
And I think that we've just put a highlight on the possibility and the potential that almost everybody has at some point. And awareness is key. I think we've drawn a lot of awareness to the possibilities and awareness to what that looks like in its varying stages and how it actually happens. So I'm thrilled that we've been able to do that. But I think this conversation between masculine, feminine energy, it's not male, female, but masculine, feminine energy. We have both of those inside all of us, and it's about finding a balance between those. I think we're here at a time in history where there's massive change going on a global scale at the moment, certainly within the spiritual movement and, all of those kinds of things. This conversation could go on for hours. And we've had one. So, thank you for the invitation. I do still firmly believe that time in nature cures most of what ails the human spirit. I think if we can articulate where we've been and what we've done or what we've experienced, then we can make a decision then to know this is not okay and make a better plan. Get into that pause, work out what it is and go, okay, I am the author. My life is my story. I'm pausing now. It's not over yet. What's the rest of it going to be? We can rewrite the ending. We can't rewrite the beginning, but we can definitely rewrite a new ending. And I'm excited about that.
And we influence our own lives. We create our lives. We don't depend on someone else. It's just a decision. It's a decision, and we control that. And before I go, I'd like to just, this is the logo. Changing mind, body, spirit to be better. And that's Venus. Venus is the word. And look, thank you, every one of you. Luke, Jazz and Belinda for being open, being honest and sharing in this. And I've got to thank the Queensland State Government for the funding they've given me to do this. Look, we look forward to the next time we get together, but certainly for now, then I thank my guests and wish you all the very best until we get together again for another yarn on Venus is the Word podcast. Thanks for coming.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here.